A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Sometimes we're doubtful that the power of God can truly lift us out of the depths of despair. Well, our special guest today says there are frequent stories of friends and workmates and people in our community who are in desperate need of what we as Christians think of as a divine transformation. Well, today, his story that may be a brutal reality check for some of us. Darren Copland had to confront the foundation of his own core beliefs, his values and his faith to discover his true identity. It's a story of transformation that traverses the challenging landscape of leadership growth, success, and then the accompanying stress, depression and anxiety. Darren Copland is the author of a new book called Killing the CEO, Losing Self, Finding God, Finding Life. Darren is the founder and director of Life Road, helping shape the next generation of leaders. Darren, a special welcome along to 2020.
Thanks, Neil. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Hey, Darren, let's start talking some of the generalities that we might be able to hear in a world that values hard work and ambition and success. It's easy to find our identity in what we do rather than who we are. This is something that you've been grappling with.
Yeah, absolutely. It never surprises me. The first question someone asks, "Hi, what's your name? What do you do?" And most of us attach what we do to who we are. And there's always a connection of sorts. For some, that can get really entwined and just so tightly connected, there's no space. And that was part of my story. I would answer people, "Oh, who are you?" "I'm Darren." "What do you do?" "I'm the CEO." And it became my entire identity, which was actually false.
And, just as we're getting into that, I mean, for some people, when they've got a fairly menial job, it's one that you're not necessarily proud of, and you feel like your identity is in what you're not proud of, and somehow or other you feel like you need a little bit of a boost and a lift and a different way of thinking about identity. That's one end, but you're talking about the other end of the spectrum. The identity that's based around your own success formulas and, your prestige.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes our identity is really, really wrapped up in those.
Look, it really can be. And my story, I was the CEO of an organisation. But I think in some ways we're all the CEO of our own life. And we think we know where we're going, how we want to get there and what we do. And it just connects so tightly. And whether it's a high-profile job or a different role, sometimes we take on this persona. So the CEO for me became my false identity. I remember sitting literally on the psychologist's couch, and they were the first 4 words that flew out of my mouth. He goes, "Darren, tell me about yourself." I go, "I'm the CEO." And after about 3 minutes, he interrupts and goes, "So you're telling me before you were the CEO, there was no Darren?" And I go, "No, but..." And he goes, "Because that'd be insane, wouldn't it?" And I'm thinking, man, this bloke's meant to help me, and he's calling me insane.
Let's talk about the sorts of foundations that might lead you into accepting that your identity is around what you do, because I picked up in your book that your dad worked 12 or 16 hours a day. So You've got this sort of role model from your early childhood that you start to think, well, that's the way you get successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the parts of our identity, they're all good and they're formed and they're right for a period of time. But the foundational beliefs that we take with us and we grow as 9 and 10-year-olds might not be the best for when we're 45, 50, whatever the age is. And I formed some really firm beliefs, hard work. My dad would work 12 to 16-hour days, so I thought that was good. So for me, that the only solution for me was just work harder. Another one was don't show any pain or any form of weakness. Rest. real men don't rest was the thought going through my head. I now know that's not smart. So there was lots of fundamental beliefs. Win, lose, win at all costs. Now, I've played lots of sport. It's not about that sort of winning and losing, but don't lose at life. Just find a way to win.
The saying, the other side of the tracks, this is something that resonated with you. And I imagine this is part of your upbringing as well, because you're always looking, the grass is greener on the other side, or on the other side of the tracks, they're living in a bigger house, driving a better car. What does that mean to you when you think of that now?
Yeah, if I could just say right up front, if anyone's playing the comparison game, it's a losing game. You cannot win. But I was unhappy with our family position and our lot in life. We always were provided for, but in my opinion, never quite got there. And I wanted, in my words, to get to the other side of the tracks. So failing just wasn't an option. And that thought drove me really hard for a long, long time to get to the other side of the tracks, and I became so focused on that. Any failure, put that in jeopardy, put that preferred future in jeopardy, and that was really tough to handle.
So out of school, I imagine you did some study and you moved into a career, and your career was into outdoor education. Tell us about how those things were shaped, and you actually, there's a whole bunch of great things that were happening in that time as well, but take us into your early career.
So I've always loved helping people, and I've always been physically active. So started my career as a PE teacher, and did that for about 6 years, and saw the light and got into outdoor education. The great thing with outdoor education is the curriculum is character. So you get to put your money where your mouth is and help people on their journey. So I loved it, and I did it really well, connected with people, built teams, taught leadership, learned a whole heap, and did that for a long period of time, and eventually became CEO of that company.
And you know what? You were the guy that our education system and our governments wanted to see getting into all of those different levels, pushing on, forging a career, being successful, and being a good taxpayer because, you're doing successful things. That's in some ways, that's the way we think about what life is supposed to lead to. What is it that's a big problem with that? What is it that actually pushes you over the edge and you lose Darren, but you're gaining the CEO?
So there's a time in life where we have to prove ourselves, and we establish our path. We finish school, we decide what we want to do, and that's good and normal. And we start performing well. It's when we connect with that, and that becomes all there is. My psychologist once said to me, Darren, you're a workaholic. And work became the means and the end. I was just never satisfied. I had to work. I had to keep working. So the CEO's drive driven by hard work, remember that was formed by watching my dad, and that just took over my whole psyche. Just keep working. And I loved it. Honestly, I loved to work. I could work 8 days a week if possible, and that nearly killed me.
All right. Now, the title of your book, Darren, is called Killing the CEO. And, it's a catchy title. It's got our attention. Killing the CEO. Losing self, finding God, finding life. Because being completely consumed with your career, the workaholism, doesn't lead to a good place.
No, it doesn't. And I ended up, after working like this for a long period of time, and these were patterns of work. It wasn't work's fault. It was the way I did it. And I ended up going through 2.5 years of complete burnout. So I was leading a company, and I came to a spot. Here's an embarrassing admission. I remember waking up one day I wasn't actually going to work. I was staying at home, and it took me half an hour to decide whether to wear shoes or thongs. And I was debilitated. The most I could do in a day was take my daughter to work, to school, come home and go back to bed for an hour and a half. And killing the CEO for me was a false identity. It wasn't Darren. It had taken over my life. And the whole concept of losing self, finding God, finding life, the verse in Matthew 16:25-26 says, "For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet forfeits his soul?" And really that's it in a nutshell. I had gained the recognition, I was paid well, I did well, I was successful, but I had lost all sense of who I was meant to be.
Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. This is 2020 with Neil Johnson on Vision Christian Radio.
And our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. Let us know if you've gone through something similar to what you're hearing our special guest talk about today. Darren Copland is our guest. He's written a book called Killing the CEO. Sometimes we're thinking the aspiration must be to be the CEO. And to do that, you've got to work 12 to 16 hours a day like Darren's dad did. And Darren, following in his footsteps, has started to realise that not everything about working 12 to 16 hours a day and making your path across the tracks actually is super valuable. When did things start to go wrong? When did you start to realise that, you were burning out and that was actually going to be a debilitating thing, Darren?
Yeah, look, shout out to the Global Leadership Summit. I was listening or watching a message from Carey Nieuwhof, an author, and he shared 11 signs of burnout. And I thought, gee, that's interesting. I think I'm pinging on about 4 of those. And, I went home that night and had a look at the list. And to be honest, I was actually pinging on all 11. And that was in October, I think it was 2019. And I didn't tell anyone about that for another 6 months. But what was happening at work, I was tanking. So I was avoiding phone calls. I was not productive at all. Now, I'm a overachieving, task-driven perfectionist, and I was avoiding people, I was avoiding work, and I knew I was in trouble.
So why don't we pause here for a moment? Talk to us about some of those things. You were pinging on 4 of them at least, and then you realised that there was a whole lot more to that. The thought of striving to achieve and to please everybody and be productive. So take us through some of those things. I know listeners are going to relate to this because you're not the only one who really struggles with identity here and the pursuit of success in that way. What were some of those things that were really striking a chord with you?
Yeah, so I noticed, these are some of the signs. I noticed my passion fading. A big one was just not feeling highs and lows. Then occasionally there was disproportionate reactions where I would just react out of character. I found people really hard. Now, I'm a people person, always been involved, but they started to really drain me. And in some ways, I even became cynical. And I wasn't satisfied. One of the big ones was not being able to think straight or logically. So before, when I said I couldn't make a decision, mentioned my productivity tanking. I wonder if any of our listeners have self-medicated, whether that's scrolling through on Facebook or having a glass of wine or whatever it is you do to keep the pain away. Rest and sleep just didn't refuel. In fact, I was so tired, the fatigue hit so hard, but I dreaded going to sleep because the sooner I went to sleep, the sooner I'd have to face tomorrow. And I'm pretty sure there's others out there who do that, particularly on a Sunday night, and you've got to go back to work and you've got to be someone that you're struggling to be.
When did it start to dawn on you that the identity that we have was actually fueling some of these things that you're taking you down this downward spiral? When did it start to become a reality that, your identity here was important?
Yeah, I really, probably as I started talking about it. After that time in 2019 or 2020, it was about 6 months later, I first shared with some colleagues at work, and it wasn't until the following August, I think, when I first realised I needed to see someone, and I went to the psychologist, and the self-awareness, he was the one who challenged me straight away, and I thought, oh man, I am completely stuck here. This is me. There was no gap at all between me, Darren, and the CEO. There was just, I thought I was answering his questions really honestly, and he's going, "You're kidding, aren't you?"
You laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny then.
No.
Hey, the idea of a false identity, some people might be thinking, well, you've got to choose an identity and be like that. I mean, we might have some movie stars that we might be trying to be like, or there might be some people who are successful in business. There might be a billionaire or two that some listeners will be following on their social media, because in some ways they want those values to be a part of who they are. And it's like an aspiration to have an identity that is far from an identity that you might discover in Christ. What about faith in all of this? When did you discover that there was a identity that comes from God himself that was part of the solution to where you were at?
So I've always had a faith, and that was part of the struggle for me, is what I believed wasn't matching up with what was happening to me. And it was a real struggle to put my theoretical knowledge, what I knew God said, I'm a child of God, I'm saved, I'm redeemed, all the promises, but none of those were actually working in my life. And there was this massive conflict. So my argument was with myself and with God, and my false identity, the CEO, the flesh, if you like, didn't want to release control. So it was really difficult to work out and to come to terms with who I am and what I'm called to do. And the only way to eventually get there was actually through God.
So a false identity fueled by flawed beliefs, values, and attitudes. So when you are pursuing the success at any cost, the CEO is in charge, and you've got a set of beliefs around that and the values that come with how do you be more successful, how do you climb the corporate ladder, how do you become rich, those sorts of things, they're fueling a false identity. The false identity, I mean, I'm just reflecting, in the scriptures, you can't serve two masters. You'll either love one and hate the other. I mean, can't serve God and mammon.
Yeah.
And mammon is more than just money. It's, I guess it's sort of wrapped up in this sort of success pursuit that we can have. So, this false identity, share a thought or two that you might have around adjusting of where you believe things about yourself that may not necessarily be true.
Yeah, look, it was, you don't even realise it's false because it was very noble. And I was doing, this all happened while I'm nobly serving the Lord. And it wasn't so much a pursuit of money, although that was present. And I didn't even realise I was doing it for status because I was spinning my wheels to serve the Lord. And it was only on deep reflection I realised whose kingdom am I building? And the flesh loves to control. Your false identity loves to control and be in charge and keep things the way they are, and is comfortable there. When we release that to the Lord and we realise that we only find true life in Him, the flesh doesn't like letting go of that because we like to control what we do, where we go and who we are and how we get there.
That's a really confronting thing. Whose kingdom am I building? And you're already a Christian believer. It's not like you were outside of some influence that was coming from hearing the word of God. But again, when you're in your own little, the cockpit of your business and you're building it, you're building your kingdom, rather than appreciating that there is a kingdom that God wants to build, and that moderates the way we think about our beliefs and our values. And so, you say the CEO gained strength through repeated actions and social recognition and promotion and even financial reward. That was what was building up the CEO. And for listeners, this is confronting. You're saying you had to put that CEO to death.
Yeah, look, the hard work became workaholism, and the CEO loved that. Just work harder. And the reason that's an issue is that makes me the solution to all my problems. That's the epitome of self. When I'm the solution to all my problems, when we're believers, God is the answer. He's the provider. I might do the work, and one of the realizations I came to in a later chapter, God revealed to me, Darren, I don't need you at all. I don't need you. And that might be really confronting to some out there, but the really lovely part of that was, but I want you, and I've got some work to do. Would you like to join me? If you think about James 4, I think it's 4-7, where he says, don't boast. I'm going to go here and do this and that and do business, blah, blah, blah. That's how I was operating. And then asking God to bless me. Faith good, intentions good, heart good, yes. Mindset completely backwards. It was me building and then asking God to bless me. He's gone, hey, I've got something for you. Would you like to work with me?
And you get to a point where you recognize in the battle, if the CEO wins that battle, you die.
Yeah.
If Darren wins, you get back your life.
So this was a really confronting, and I wrote the title deliberately. The depths I went to, and I know there's people out there who would understand this. I went from really competent to 2.5 years of burnout where I could barely get off the bed. The depths of depression, the doctor diagnosed me with a major depressive disorder. I was in a downward spiral, and praise God, I never went to the extremes of thinking suicide or ending, but I can really see how people would get there. But the depths were terrible and really, really, really low. And it was a struggle to make my way out of that place. If I had have kept going, I could have died physically. If I had have kept going and lived, I would have just been a shell of who I was called to be. Now think about some of the people you know in your life. School's an easy example. Ever seen that teacher at school that you know should have stopped teaching 20 years ago? They're a shell of what they used to be and a shell of who they could have been. And there's people in every walk in life who are stuck in a job and have stayed there. If I had have stayed doing what I was doing, that was the death I was facing, either physical or real.
Hey, Darren, let's talk about hitting rock bottom here for a few moments because, you're going to kill the CEO because the CEO is your primary identity. And it's a wrong identity, and it's led you to a place where you've been on a downhill run, spiraling out of control and into depression, and I think you said something like 2.5 years. But what does rock bottom feel like and look like for listeners who are thinking, I want to have an identity that's success-focused, and I want to have the identity that, is working hard and achievement-oriented. What does rock bottom look like and feel like?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So when it goes pear-shaped, it really does go pear-shaped. I had never been one to struggle in my thinking, in my physical ability. it was complete burnout, physical, mental, spiritual, social, you name it. Physically, I went from doing anything I liked to I'd play some basketball with the kids in the backyard and used to beat them. Played at 21. I played one game to 7 and I had to stop, and it took me out for 2 days. I couldn't get off the couch for 2 days. All I wanted to do was go back to bed. Socially, this was tough on my wife. And spiritually, I suppose, I hated going to church. I hated going to any social setting. If I went to a cafe, I would sit with my back to the wall, eyeing the first exit, praying that I wouldn't see anyone that I knew. And I became an expert in flipping conversations. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, good. Yourself? And I would just walk away. And my wife would be left there to come up with some story about where I was. So I went from competent, leading an organisation of 35 people, inspiring others, just loving everything about life, to avoiding everything of life.
When you hit rock bottom, you say not only did you find yourself, and being at rock bottom isn't, I guess, anybody's aspiration, but you found God when you were at rock bottom. How does that work?
So I was always a Christian since the age of 4, but some of what I believed was wrong, and I was arguing with him at the same time. The scriptures I had lent on all my life weren't quite balancing, weren't making sense. So I had to actually get the courage to spend some time with God and talk to him directly. And that was a scary.
This is interesting. Are there scriptures that you can rely on when you are the CEO that keep you focused on the success mentality, which is actually diverting you away from the identity that you might find in Christ? Is there a certain way you can look at the scriptures and say, these are the scriptures that are going to lead me on to the success that I really feel like I'm led to?
Yeah, and I think when we read the scriptures wrong or from a certain mindset, what's been preached over the years, my concept of God was that he was thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening. And I discovered on this journey that he's a lot kinder than I thought he was. John 10:10 is a scripture that I still stand on to this day, but I've had a new revelation. I come and give life, and life to the full. Now, in my head and in Western civilization, when we say life to the full, we think glory to glory, good to good, success to success. And to be honest, that's been preached a lot. I realized if death is part of life, then life to the full is the full experience. Every emotion, the depths of depression are part of life to the full. God didn't say, I would just give you a wonderful time. In fact, he said, I'll give you trouble. And he walks alongside you with it, through it. And then that's where I discovered that he's actually a lot kinder and nicer than I ever thought he was.
In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. That has a different meaning for you now, because when you were at rock bottom, now I'm interested just to explore here for a moment, that God allowed you, as the CEO doing successful things, to hit rock bottom so that you could discover there was more to your identity than just the CEO. How do you reflect on that?
Yeah, that was probably the whole point. He allows situations to get us to a point of honesty. And on the back of my book, I say it's a brutal reality check. We need to be honest and dig deep and find out what God actually means and what he says. And we sometimes find our wiring, the way we've been trained to think, may not be as accurate as we originally think.
1-800-316-316. Our talkback line is open. Let's take a call. Jim is in Broken Hill. Hello, Jim. Welcome along.
Hello. Thank you very much.
Jim, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've been listening to what Darren's been saying, and I'm not being critical of him or anything like that. But I've two thoughts came to my mind. The first thought is that Darren's false identity can be another person's true identity, and also Darren's true identity can be another person's false identity. By all of that, I mean that human beings are different. They are not exactly the same, and different things bring that satisfaction of them feeling that they have found their true identity.
I can appreciate what you're saying here, Jim. Let's hear from Darren, because, Darren, I know that you recognise that there are people who have giftings, their personalities, the strength of their character comes from a certain way they're wired. What are your thoughts here for Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks for calling in, mate. Look, I agree. The skills and abilities that God has given me and that I used in my role 100% have become really, really valuable. I haven't lost any of those. I think to be our fullest and best selves, we find that in God. And that has been my journey, not finding it in just myself and my desires and my motivations. To be I don't think any of us can be the best version of ourselves outside of our Creator, because that's who He's called us to be.
Are we looking here about a different way of recognising the value of a CEO? Just come back to Jim here for a moment. Jim, is this what you're saying? Of course, we need to have Christian believers who are grounded right in identity, who are pursuing the thought of being the CEO. But Jim, what were you saying around that? Is anything further to add?
Yes, Darren's answer for Darren is believing in the Christian God and following the Christian God. But it's also, I feel it's important to recognise that other people find exactly the same answer in following Brahma.
I can hear what you're saying here, Jim, and just to bring this back here for a moment, because in our context of knowing God, we might be in pursuit of the mission of God, understanding what He's doing in His kingdom and building that kingdom. You might be just pursuing what you might think is a gift as the CEO, but you might be building some other kingdom and doing something that has an absolutely uselessness about it that will matter nothing in eternity. I'll come back to you here, Darren. The idea of having an eternal value to what you do, does this have some sort of bearing on your killing the CEO?
Yeah, I believe we're eternal beings. We're spirit, mind, and body, and I believe there's only one God, and we're called and created in His image to be like Him. Yep, people find their identity in all sorts of things, but I believe our truest and best selves is actually found in the Christian God, and that's been an argument since the dawn of time. And I think God wins. I walk outside and I look up and I see the breadth of His creation, and I see the detail in the people beside me, and I see the story of my own life. And the only solution for me at rock bottom was to talk to Him and to see what He said and to choose to agree with that.
I want to thank Jim for his insight. Thanks so much, Jim, in Broken Hill. Let's take another call. Belinda is in Portland in Victoria. Hi, Belinda. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was listening to your program and I just thought it makes so much sense when Darren was talking about who are you, who do you relate to. I used to be a nominated supervisor for an after-school care, but then I got to the point where I was so burnt out and not realising, like, I can understand Darren thinking, oh, I'm only 4 of those. But when he got home and realised he was 11, that's when I think God does jump in, because the circumstance happened to me where I was at the end of the day and I said to one of the girls, how do you spell close? And she said, what, close as in close the door, or close as in clothes that you wear? And I just thought, oh my gosh, I have just pushed myself to the point where my brain is in such overload that I'm, like, can't even spell a word that I know quite clearly how to spell. And that's when God stepped into my life and just said, you need to slow down, young lady, because you can't keep doing this forever.
Darren, what are your thoughts here for Belinda?
Belinda, I can completely understand what you're saying. The shoes and thongs example is the most vivid in my mind. Half an hour to decide whether to wear shoes or thongs, and I wasn't even going out of the house. When you go from that level of functioning, that high level functioning, to a complete inability to make a decision, and that sense of overwhelm. That overwhelm was always a really big issue. They're warning signs. You have to do something about it. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Share it with someone. I never understood the concept of rest. And in my psyche, real men don't rest. We don't need it, and we keep going. So I'm glad you're able to talk to someone.
Well, I'd actually sort of pushed on forward, and now I'm sitting here with a broken leg. So I think that maybe there was a little bit of intervention where God just said, I said, sit down, slow down.
Yeah.
Can I tell a story? When God talks, you really should listen, but be careful how much you ask of him. I said, the last thing he said to me was, Darren, this is when I was trying to get better, just don't rush, just be. So I'm doing that. I'm recovering. I'm on my mountain bike, just trying to build my health, do good things. Lord, speak to me really bluntly if you need to. Last thing he said was, don't rush, just be. I'm riding my bike on the last ride of the day, and perhaps the name of the track says it all. It was called Gumby Gumby. And I was riding along, front wheel went off the side. I face planted so hard, I fractured my back, smashed my face up. It was debilitating, and I thought, yep, God has a sense of humour as well. Don't rush, just be. Sometimes he has to do things to get our attention.
All right. God's got your attention, Belinda. Thank you so much for your call. 1-800-316-316. Although running short on a little bit of time here, because I want to explore some things with you, Darren. The journey of transformation. You explore in your book what it took to rediscover your true self. And of course, if you're coming from a position where you're outside of God's family, you're not a believer, you don't even think there's God, you're an atheist or something like that, it's going to mean something a little bit different to you, because that atheist or that non-believer is going to want to pursue an identity which they think is going to be a useful, successful tool for them. You've discovered that God is even able, in the things that happen to you, having a face plant off your bicycle, or, COVID hits and business goes bad. All sorts of bad things can happen. And sometimes people say, well, how does God allow bad things to happen to good people? There's something that is in his attention grabbing in all of that. So take us to this journey of transformation. You've recognized that God is there even when you're going through some hardships, and he's lifting you to a new level, and he's going to redirect your course, and he's going to redirect your values, redirect your beliefs. How do you talk about that?
So he really does get your attention one way or the other, and we tend to argue for a long time. Eventually we all, doesn't matter if we're atheist or born-again believers, we will answer to our Creator. I came to the point of surrendering. And I just had to say, God, I've tried everything I know. I've done all I can do. And he said, maybe I can show you a little bit more. So I started to surrender my control of my life. I was at this point getting worried about the future. So I'd shifted from depression to anxiety about what was going to happen because I didn't have the capacity to move forward and control my future. I was about to lose my job. Everything was on the line, and the way through was to surrender and then to trust him in what he's got for me. And that took relearning the scriptures, it took reading, it took time in nature. And I remember a time on a holiday, we're in Monaco, Monte Carlo, and looking at these $1 million vessels, and he said, I just had this revelation, the very best man can do is build the fanciest car or boat to go to the fanciest place to look at what I have made. And then he said something quite amazing. He said, Darren, I've got this. And I was just filled with peace and just this. And that has never left me, the peace that he's got this. I need to trust in him. And that's where the rest came. So the transformation was shifting all this head knowledge I had about who God was and rest and all these concepts, a transformation into actually believing it in my heart.
Wow. And chapter 9 in your book is called The CEO's Last Stand. The CEO doesn't want to relinquish that control. And you use a wonderful word in there, surrender to God. You talk about some what-if questions, the dangling carrot of, that self-righteous, perfectionist, workaholic success. It's always there coming back, trying to haunt you in some sense. But the last stand, you've actually got to fight that battle, haven't you?
You do. The flesh never wants to give up easily. By this stage, I knew that I did not have the capacity to be the CEO anymore. And the board of directors knew that, and they had retitled me as an executive director, working as a director on the board. But I had no idea what that meant. But the CEO's last stand, I could be even better. I can be much more strategic, have much more influence and do this. And it was just back in overdrive. And I entertained this idea for about a month, and my health plummeted again. And it was at that point I realized what was going on, and that was Easter. It was actually Easter. And in my book, I've got a painting that I did, and it's called My Surrender Hands, where I finally let go of everything and surrendered to God. And you still got to walk the journey out. The transformation, the choice is instantaneous, but the journey, it's a journey. It's a daily journey. The CEO pops his head up every now and then, wants me to work harder. I've just got to stay true to the choices I've made.
You've told your story in the book, Killing the CEO, Losing Self, Finding God, Finding Life. And I know listeners might want to get a hold of that. Just remember, Killing the CEO, Darren Copland. You've started a new organisation now because you say in all of the development that led you to rock bottom, you learned a lot of things along the way, and you've got a new organisation that you've launched called Life Road, which is personalised coaching and team development, leadership training, fostering self-awareness and resilience and visionary leadership. Those sorts of things are all a part of who you are, but there's a dimension in there that you're bringing, not just a whole lot of, personal development type of insights, but you've got how to protect yourself along the way and how to understand your identity. Listeners connecting with you on that, I guess you're available for speaking engagements and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can do stuff on a Zoom call, you can speak to groups.
Love speaking, love connecting with people. I just think I wrote the book because I want to help people. My company, Life Road, is about moving people forward. We're on a journey. I don't mind which step I help you with. I just desperately want to help people. I think my journey and my story would not be isolated. I know others who think just like me and are wired that way. And if we can learn from other people, I think that's smart. And in some ways, my book is a bit of a roadmap. And I would love to walk alongside people on the journey, either individually in coaching, speaking, getting the message out there, making it okay to talk about mental health and the challenges, or doing a 2-day course on identity and your who you are and where you want to go in life. So if you head to my website, liferoad.com.au, you'll see the offerings there. Send me an email. Connect by email. We'll have a chat. I'm prepared to go anywhere, talk to anyone, anytime.
Okay, so there's seminars that are developing, and you're just looking for some invitations now, and no doubt there'll be listeners.
Absolutely.
And you're based in southeast Queensland, but prepared to travel wherever. For listeners to connect with Darren, liferoad.com.au. I mentioned the book, Killing the CEO, Losing Self, Finding God, Finding Life. That one will be available online booksellers, just as easy as simply doing a Google search on that. You'll find the book. Darren, wonderful getting your insights. Thanks so much for sharing those with listeners today on 2020.
Thanks so much for having me, and have a good day, everybody.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.